Hey folks, Jason Duke's Dirt Race Life. In this episode, we're continuing our build on our crate racing street stock. We've got an engine and a transmission here, and we're going to fabricate some motor mounts for them and then install them into our chassis. Stick around. This engine that I'm using as a donor for this mock-up, it will be coming back out. This engine does have a problem with it. I won't be running this one, but it's a good one because it still had the oil pan on it, like the oil pan I'm going to use. Went ahead and put a fuel pump back on it, and the heads that are on it, the headers I've got will bolt up to it because we need to have all this bolted in so that we can continue our tubes and stuff on our car. So I'm going to use it to mock it up, but you know, it is coming out. And for that reason, I'm not going to worry about putting the flex plate and everything on it. But for those of you who have not run a direct drive transmission before, I was going to show this right quick. Now, I've got a Falcon here. This is a Winner's product, and it's a Falcon. You see how it's got that short stub that sticks out on the end of it? The Falcon is a little different. I've been real happy with it. So it uses a flange, and they all use a flange, but the Falcon uses two pieces like this, and so your flange, you have a jack shaft that goes in between, and then you have a coupler for the transmission. And I found this real interesting because the idea of it is that, you know, as far as alignment goes between your motor and your transmission, you're not necessarily going to pass harmonics through, and if you have any misalignment in your jack shaft with your shaft of your transmission directly going into the engine, that misalignment, you know, is there creating a bias if you've got any issue in your bell house or anything. But with this intermediate shaft, the way it works, you could have a certain amount of misalignment and you're not going to transfer that through into your transmission. And so I wonder, and you can tell me from your experience, but I would think that you would have better success with this type setup with it not breaking an ear off of the transmission or cracking a bell housing as easy, because if you do have an issue, it seems like this right here is going to possibly stop some of that from transferring through. So just a thought. I wanted to show that in case you hadn't seen one, how it works. Okay, we're putting an engine plate. That's how we're going to mount. This is the only way I mount engines in cars now. So this is just a generic one that I bought, and it does not matter if you're building your car, if you've got any friends that have run a lot of late models and modifieds over the years, reach out to them and see. People have these, and because, for example, you may have more than one where that they've got and they're switching engines around on their chassis, and so they end up with more than one, and then the chassis get sold off or destroyed. And so check around before you buy one. Ask around, because these things are everywhere, and it doesn't matter which exact one that you're going to get because you're making your mounts. We're going to make, you'll see that, we're going to make our mounts to go to these holes. And so like the offset of it doesn't necessarily matter because you're going to put it where you want over here, so you're going to put your engine where you want. So just food for thought. This one right here was, I think, about $60 and new, just a solid aluminum one. We're going to use this, but because we're using this, this is 1/4 inch. One thing that you do have to do, and if I can get to them, I'll move this over just a little bit here. You have got to, and you've got to do this, y'all. Your dowel pins in the back of your engine are not designed for a mid plate like that, okay? Your stock dowel pins are not designed for your mid plate. You've got to knock those out. These are not expensive. You need to order a set of extended length dowel pins because now you're gonna go through that mid plate and then your bell housing is coming onto it. And these are chamfered on the front. And if you've got the short regular stock one like from GM on here, then this chamfer here is all that your bell housing is going to be connected onto. And so your bell housing can become misaligned because there's room around all your bolts and everything. And if you're not on these dowel pins securely, then that bell housing can be off. And being off a little bit on your bell housing can be a problem. So, you know, extended length dowel pins that go in and they just knock in. Set the plate on here, it's on the dowel pins, and you see these extended length dowel pins, they still have a nice 1/4 inch of shoulder here. It's about a 1/4 inch of shoulder right here. So if I had the regular length ones in, I wouldn't have that. I would just have this little nub sticking out, and then I don't have a way to really securely hold my bell housing in place. So now the bell housing, throw it up here. And I'm going to throw the transmission on. And we're going to mount this engine with the bottom of the oil pan on the front 1 inch above my cross member. I had that set up in some other cars and it worked out right for me as far as the engine height, where everything worked out. I felt like that it was as high as I could make the engine without really just being difficult with breather sticking way up out of the hood and my body lines and everything like that. And so I just kind of stuck with that as far as the height of it. But we're going to mount this, again, the frame is on the jig. And so the frame itself has got rake in it. I've got that 2 degrees downhill on the rake with the frame. And we're going to mount this engine with the engine dead level. Let's get this transmission up here. Yeah, like I said, I've been real happy with this Falcon. They're a fairly simple transmission. Some people, when I was researching them, people complained about them being difficult to shift. I have not had any problem with this transmission as far as shifting. When I read the owner's manual on it, it called out talking about when you shift, like when you shift into low or reverse, shift firmly. And I was like, what does that mean, shift firmly? But after running it, I understand you don't have synchronizers in it. And so you've got, you know, spinning gears that are turning, and they're just straight cut gears in there. And so when they say shift firmly, it's like when you decide you're going to go in reverse, you put it in reverse. You don't pull up to it and kind of feel it bump on it, because all it's going to do is just sit there and chew up your gears by doing that. So yeah, shift firmly means like if I'm going to go in reverse, I just jerk it in reverse. And don't have any problem, but I do understand why some people say, well, they're hard to get in gear. Well, if you were timid about putting it in gear, it would seem like there was something wrong and it was difficult to put in gear. And if you just shove it in gear, you don't have a problem. So that's my only feedback really that I've got with this transmission. And I don't use it to load on the trailer. I mean, I use a winch, so I'm trying not to prematurely run the clutches on it. Let me get another bolt. Just snug is all I need on those. Before we actually put this engine in, we have a critical step. And it involves a string and a marker. If you can move an all steel engine back 1 inch, that's like moving about 30 pounds 20 inches rearward in your car. So think about that, and that's the math actually works on that if you figure out the weight and like moving it 1 inch and how that does it. Just think about that for a second. If you could take a 30-pound weight and unbolt it and move it rearward 20 inches on your car, would that be an advantage? It would, wouldn't it? So the reason I say that is because if you are just working with your car and your frame, you're going off of your lower ball joints, or you're going off of your stock locations on your uppers and everything, and then allowing for you know, some margin there to make sure you're safe or you're okay in how you're doing it, you could be losing up to an inch, and that's what I'm talking about. So that's the reason my caster and camber, especially caster, is set on this. It's been set from the get-go if you go back to that episode. And so now what I'm going to do is this is where it comes in. This is where it pays off. That's if I could get this loop to stay on that Inclinometer. So this line that I'm going to draw isn't kind of in the right place. It is in the right place. Because we don't want to be kind of okay safe. We want to be exactly where the rule allows. And so I'm building this now, and this is built on rules that say number 1 spark plug must be no further rearward than upper ball joint. Usually is what they'll say, something like that. Alright? And the number 1 spark plug, this is another thing to keep in mind. Your number 1 spark plug is not the same as your number 2 spark plug. They set at 2 different. So the number 1 and the number 2 on your engine here, when you're looking, your number 1 is over here and it's forward. Your number 2 is rearward, and that's because on a small block Chevrolet V8, your cylinders are not Siamese of each other, they're offset. And so for that reason, your number 1 cylinder head, your left bank cylinder head sits forward. And so ignore this number 2 spark plug. And so that's an important point. You know, don't worry about this number 2 spark plug looking like it's behind where the ball joint is. That's not what the rules say. Check your rules, but most all of the rules for everywhere that I run will say number 1. So I don't care if this number 2 is behind. All right, so I've got my string going across here, some alumite to alumite, and then I'm going to take my plumb bob and I am going to carefully mark where those are. Alright, okay, so I got me some marks right here. I'm just going to connect the dots. Alright, so that line right there, I'm going to take a plumb bob and put on my number 1 spark plug, and I want it there. I don't want it in front of it a little bit or anything. I want it right there, because the rules say number 1 spark plug, ball joint, and no, that's what we're doing. So I've got me a 1-inch block of wood. I'm going to sit right up over there. That's kind of my guide. That's been my go-to for years. I'm going to set it level front to back is the first thing we're going to do. And then we'll slide it around and get everything else. All right, let's see where that is. All right. Okay, let's see. We are 1.3 in which direction? All right, so we're just a hair high on this back here. We are nearly there. These intakes don't necessarily sit perfect. Let's check. And so, like, I put it on the head right here. I'm 0.1, so we're gonna go with that. All right, we got this motor where we want it. Let me show you. Here's how we did it, okay? Took and put a long 7/16 bolt in the front, put a plumb bob line. It's just a big nut tied on the bottom of it here. This is the power of the jig though. So this jig is 71 3/4 inches edge to edge across here, okay? And so that means that the exact center is 35 7/8, okay? And so I put that line exactly on 35 7/8. And then I turn around, took another plumb bob string, and put on the very back of the transmission, put it right across the center, and then I set the back on 35 7/8 back here. The car itself is sitting at 2 degrees rake. The engine though, I'm gonna set level. So I leveled it by the plate on top, then I leveled it by the head here. So I know I'm in there, 0, 0. I know I'm correctly sitting in the middle here. Oh, one more thing, right here. Like I said, the #1 spark plug here, I've got that level, sitting on a level with a magnet holding it, splitting the spark plug on the line. And that line is popped exactly to my upper ball joint. And if you don't think that's way back from where a lot of people are, look where the motor mount is in relationship to the frame. I'm telling you, there are a lot of engines that are sitting very conservative. We don't want conservative. We want to have every advantage we can take. That's not pushing the rules, that is built to the rules. So that's the reason that we took and put all of this in place first, because we know where this will be. Now, that said, I can't just up and decide to run 0 caster on my left front, because suddenly I would be illegal if I did that, because I'd move that ball joint way forward if I did that. So just keep that in mind. All right, next up is the motor mounts themselves. Here's what we're doing. We're going to use a lug nut for the nut. The reason for that is because this is going to be your highest grade ability to hold pressure and torque that is accessible and inexpensive. Now, I've got some 1-inch, half-inch 20s, 1 inch as far as the size of the outside of the nut. I got these on a car years ago. They were thrown in or something, or someone had still had their stock studs on the patterns or something. So I've got these. You don't have to use these. This is a regular, like you'd get at just your parts store, half-inch 20. That's like 3/4 inch. And this is fine. You know, you could use this, and I'll show you. What I'm going to use here is a washer. This is a SAE 5/8 washer. And it's actually a little bigger than a 5/8. It's probably 3/4 of an inch hole. But the cone sits into the hole. And then the flange is large enough, and this is thick enough. Since this is an SAE, this is a higher grade of washer. And so what we do is we weld the lug nut into the washer, and then we turn around and we weld the washer into the tube, and then that makes the stand. The way I do this is I'm going to take a 1/2-inch 20 donor, and you see I've got a nut on it, and I'm going to put it together. And this is the first part. So the first thing we do is we want to get the nut welded onto the washer. I have not found a simpler, less expensive way to build a very robust engine mount, and it is robust. I mean, this is great. All right, so we run that down. It's centered, and because it's a lug nut, it's cone. See, it's going to center into the washer. It's going to square itself up. You know, so it's perfect for this. So run that down. We're gonna MIG that up all the way around on the inside, and then we'll drop it into the tube. Nothing to it. I was trying to make sure that I didn't get my weld way out on the edge of that washer, because, cool off everybody. So that's going into that tube. So if your weld gets out on the edge of this washer, you may have to clean that back with a grinder with like a cutoff wheel or something. Let's see how mine did. It did pretty good. It's standing up in one little spot. I got just a little bit of weld, so I'm gonna clean that off. See how that fits. Oh yeah. And so you see, we're just gonna drop it in, and then we're gonna flip it over, and we're gonna weld it around the outside. It's easy as pie. That is it. So 1/2-inch 20, sitting flat, got a washer face. Of course, we want a flat, that way when we put the motor in, the motor mounts just sit on top of it. We can slide the engine dowel pins into our rear mount So that's important. That's the reason you don't want studs sticking up. So if you think about it, if you're using a mid plate and you've got a stud sticking up here, so if you just like weld a bolt on, you're like, I'm just gonna sit down on this bolt and put a nut on it because that'll be easy. No, it won't. Because what happens is that now you have to sit it up over those bolts to drop the motor in, but you've got dowel pins, that need to slide straight back into a mid plate. And so, bad combination. This is the way you want to do it. And again, I have built several of these over the years. And here, I've already gotten this one done too. By far, this is the quickest, easiest, and least expensive way to make a great motor mount. So, hey, if you like this technical stuff on the episodes, the way that I'm doing this, because this is the stuff that I just live for, is figuring out how to do these things. If this is good and you haven't subscribed, hit subscribe, follow along. And if you've already subscribed, we have a channel membership now that I have set up. And we'll take this stuff back over here. We've got a channel membership that we've set up, and what it is it's a sponsorship of the channel. And so we set it up at $4.99 a month. It's not going to change. And it is strictly a sponsorship. If you appreciate what we're doing and you want to see more of this, well, we want to create more of this. So check out our channel membership. Hit the icon down in, it's either in this corner or that corner. I can't remember, but my DRL logo, the subscribe and the join are both there. And I appreciate it. We want to get our tube cut to fit into this slot right here for the stand. And this is an 1.5" tube. It's an 1.5" slot right here, so it's going to sit right in the center of where the slot is. And we do want to center it up. The engine we're going to mount center. We're going to be in the center of the slot. That's going to give us the most flexibility if you ever needed to shift the engine left or right for any reason, such as you were really struggling to get the left side percentage you needed, or you wanted to take some away or something. Well, shifting the engine is definitely going to affect that. So how do we do this? Well, we're going to do two things. We're going to get, first thing we're going to do is we're going to set a ruler in the center, and I'm going to just get as close as I can. I'm using a level here just to make sure I'm straight up and down at 90, because that would throw it way off. All right, so we're in the center, and let's see, to the bottom of it is 3 3¾ inches. So we're 3 3/4 inches to the bottom of the mount in the center. And then the other thing we need to know is what is the angle of our mount here. It should be 45. Yeah, I'm showing 45.6. So we're going to say 45. Now that we know that, all we have to do is set our chop saw up at 45. And then turn around and set it up for 3 3/4 inch, cut it off, and we should be really close. You see, we've cut a 45 on the end here by our measurements. And I did a little bit of extra trimming. I've already tried this once and did a little bit of trimming, because what we're after here is we want to make sure it's flush to the motor mount. And we want it to sit flush on that motor mount for sure. And then obviously we want it flush against the cross member as well. But if I'm of course on the cross member, if I don't fit exactly perfect, remember I'm welding that. So just make sure that you are sitting exactly perfect to the motor mount itself. I'm in the center. And so what we're going to do is we're going to put a bolt in. We'll snug it up. We won't weld this side until we have the other side done as well. So we'll do both sides. Then we'll turn around and we will make sure this engine and transmission is sitting exactly per our measurements. We haven't accidentally shifted anything or bumped anything. Of course, if you think about it, if I'm exactly in the center of these, I'm putting engines in and out. I know where to bolt it down. I don't have to worry, because you can put twist in these motor plates. That's something to keep aware of. Like if you don't have these mounted center and you're putting this in, you don't know exactly where to sit these. It's real easy to put a little bit of a bow or a flex into this mid plate, and the engine be off a little bit. It'll be bound between the two and you won't realize it. I don't know that's going to make a huge difference, but it's where you'll run into problems. Like for example, it may not be enough to cause you a problem in your drive shaft with vibration or anything, but I tell you what it probably will do. If you've got a really good fan shroud set up and you're really tight on your fan, you pull the engine out, you put the engine back in, you get just a little bit of bow or twist in this. Now your fan blades are in your shroud for some reason. And you're like, what's going on? Why am I in my fan shroud? Well, that's where you can be off just a little bit on your motor mounts, and you got just a little bit of bow going on here in this mid plate. It's letting you get in your fan shroud. I like a really tight fan shroud. I run no holes in my nose or anything. Never had a problem overheating, but my fan shroud is made right. So center helps for that reason as well. All right. On this side, this is the driver's side, there's a little bit of a curve that I had to put into this. I had to cut this one just a little bit different. I cut it a 45 starting out a little long, and then I worked, kind of crept my way into it, but it's much shorter. And so that was something I wanted to point out just to keep you from making a mistake. The cross member in these GM frames, it's not the same on each side, and that has to do with accessories and pumps, the way that these cars come from the factory, like having the steering sector on this side. This cross member extends out further up top on one side than it does the other, and so just be careful of not trying to like find a center between these two walls, because the engine would not be centered in the car if you did that. Because on that side I cut this to like 3.5 inches back, but on this side I'm cutting it down to like 2.5, because it's actually sitting up at a higher point here across this, and it's over this hump, so I had to curve this to fit. And I got it worked out and centered. Like I said, just had to kind of cut a little bit long and then just trim my way up to it. But it worked out good. Make sure your settings on your welder are right for this. I'm burning this fairly hot. I'm at about 200 inches, about 18 volts, and I want this to be in there. All right, let's take a look at these lateral supports right here. This right here, let me get down here where you can see it. This right here is 3/4 inch 083 tube. All right, I put these in, and I just spotted them on for now. After I take this engine and transmission back out, then I'll weld these up solid. But the reason for this is this aluminum plate in a significant wreck, it's gonna bow, it's gonna give. The tube itself is not going to bend, but what will happen is this motor mount is going to twist, and this cross member is going to cave in on the front. It's going to stay in position on the back. This will cave in on the front. The whole engine will shift forward. It can happen all at once in a really significant wreck, but if you get in a wreck that's that heavy, you've probably lost the front clip anyway. The reason that I chose to put these in is because the life of the frame over time. So for example, if throughout the seasons of wrecking, not that I want to, but it's gonna happen. So if I get into a couple significant fender benders, if I T-bone into somebody, or if I run into a wall, or I catch a ute tire really hard, these things happen, hopefully not very often, but you can have it happen once or twice a season possibly. And every time that happens, that's engine, with the transmission on, it's over 700 pounds that's wanting to move forward, move forward, move forward. And so even if you're not in a really significant wreck that what makes you lose the front clip, you're still having this accumulative effect of slowly bending these motor mounts forward. And so what happens is that this plate starts to get bowed, and you pull your engine out and you put it back in, and it's like it's in a bind, and you draw it down and it's bowed on you. Maybe everything's still working, but it's nothing fits right anymore. So that cumulative effect over time is the reason for me putting these in. Now, an important note, I want you to take a look at how I did this. I am putting crossover headers that go up, but if your headers go down, You need to pay attention to where your headers go, because this tube, like I did this here, it could be in the way. There's lots of options. This tube could be on the front coming forward. This could actually just be gussets across here. So there's several options on how you do it, but just keep in mind that you don't create a conflict, because like right here, you know, I have your header tubes just wrapped right through here, depending on which ones you've got. And you could have a conflict, and it may just be as simple as making sure this is coming short enough that it does fit. Just keep that in mind. So we've got our front mounts complete. The next mounts that we need to complete would be the rear for the rear plate. We're going to have some pieces that are going to come out and tie onto tubes here, but we can't do those yet. And so let's talk about what's coming up in the next video. We're going to mount the crossover headers in. The reason we're going to mount the crossover headers in is because we need to make sure that our front frame tubes that come across and down, that those are out of the way and there's not a conflict. That means I need where those tubes tie into. Well, that's the shock tower for the front. So we've got hoops that we've got to put on the front here over our control arms so that we can tie our tubes in from our main cage. Then we can turn around and take and figure out the down tube to tie onto the plate. So there's several steps that have to happen there in a specific order. That's coming up in the next video. We're literally working on it the same day here that we're wrapping this video up. So we're going to work to get that out really quick. If you like it, smash that like button. Don't forget to subscribe. Thank y'all.